Hello, and welcome to our second Student and Family Open Forum. I'm Amy Bingham, your moderator for today's session. A lot of work is going into the safe return of students to the Hill for fall 2020. Students and parents understandably have a lot of questions. Our first live forum held on Monday answered many questions about testing protocols, housing, dining, and the development of WKU's Restart Plan. Today, we will answer your lingering questions about our operational norms, as well as our testing protocols, and we'll outline how student activities are being adapted to keep you and your community safe. Now, if you have a question that you would like to submit, please email those to forum.questions@wku.edu. We will get to as many of these as we possibly can. Also, we want to remind you that this video, as well as the video from Monday, will be available on our Facebook page, as well as our website, wku.edu/healthyonthehill. Before we begin, let me introduce you to our panel of experts. Rob Hale, Associate Provost of Academic Affairs, to answer questions about classes and course delivery. Laura Tomlin, with Environmental Health and Safety, who serves as one of WKU's Healthy at Work officers and is a member of WKU's COVID-19 response team. Sharon Hunter, Assistant Director of Data Analytics and Research in Housing and Residence Life, to answer questions about how WKU will communicate with parents and families as we adjust to a different fall semester. Chris Thorne, CEO of Graves Gilbert Clinic, WKU's on-campus healthcare partner, who will be able to answer questions about PCR and antibody testing protocols. Lynn Holland, Dean of Students and Assistant Vice President for Student Life, answering questions about students' individual responsibility to keep our community safe. Andrew Rash, Coordinator of Student Activities, to give an overview of changes coming to WKU's 300+ clubs, organizations, and student activities. Candace Douglas, Assistant Director, Facilities at the Preston Center, to talk about the changes to operations, recreation, and workout at the Preston Center. Jennifer Tugas, Assistant Vice President of Business Services, to answer questions about changes to parking, transportation, and the WKU store. And Zach Greenwell, Director, Communications and Media Relations with Athletics, to talk through changes to the student fan experience for WKU athletics this fall. Now, before we jump into the questions, let's begin with Laura Tomlin from Environmental Health and Safety to remind us of WKU's testing, tracing, and quarantine protocols that will be in place as students return to campus. Laura?
Thank you, Amy. WKU continually engages with partner physicians from Graves Gilbert Clinic, the Medical Center Health, along with Barron River District and Kentucky State Public Health Departments to validate our plans consistent with the latest guidance from the CDC and the Office of the Governor. We also have procedures in place for our daily health checks for faculty, staff, and students as defined by our policy EHS 001. WKU is also finalizing a policy that provides specific guidance for requirements for protective measures in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The policy formalizes the requirements for face coverings, social distancing, and disinfecting across campus. We are providing access to testing on campus for faculty, staff, and students in accordance with public health and physician guidance. This guidance includes testing for individuals that display symptoms that are consistent with COVID-19 infections. It also provides guidance for individuals who have been in close contact with someone who has tested positive for COVID-19. If an individual is identified through public health, through contact tracing, as likely exposed to an infected person, or if a physician orders a test based on identified risk factors or prior to a medical procedure that they may have scheduled. Testing costs will be covered for all faculty and staff and students throughout the public health emergency. Contact tracing is completed by state and regional public health officials. We do have some dedicated contact tracers that are assigned just to higher education in our region. And we're going to actively support that effort through public health. And we will also notify any persons who are identified as being in close, or I'm sorry, public health will notify any individuals that have been identified as being in close contact with a positive case. And we will continue to support that effort. Now, a close contact is identified, is defined as being within 6 feet of an infected individual for at least 15 minutes. This is the reason for the CDC guidance on social distancing. And if we all practice that social distancing in classrooms and other common areas across campus, we should avoid becoming in contact. Medical case management will also be available on campus through Graves Gilbert Clinic. WKU has dedicated a team to respond to cases of COVID-19 that involve any faculty, staff, or students, and we will provide guidance and support to those individuals. WKU has also developed a quarantine plan for students living in on-campus housing. This plan includes provisions for quarantine of both symptomatic and asymptomatic students. This plan also provides support for meals, healthcare, counseling, and academic support. Data related to cases of COVID-19 on WKU's campus will be updated weekly on the Healthy on the Hill website. This dashboard has been launched and will provide data on numbers of cases in various demographics and the number of PCR tests conducted.
All right, thank you, Laura. I'm sure we'll be back to you with some questions. Let's begin with Andrew Rash, who's here to tell us the answer to this question. Will organizations such as BSM and CREW be allowed to meet face-to-face at the beginning of the semester, or will they have to conduct meetings through Zoom?
The answer to that question, that depends on that organization, and as long as they are following the guidelines within capacity limits, if they can do that successfully, they can meet in person. If their capacity would exceed whatever the capacity limitations are, they would need to do that through an alternative format. But as long as clubs and organizations are following capacity limits, that's something they can do. And that's something we've been working with our various groups of learning how to be creative with that. Again, it might be something that's done through a Zoom format. It might be something that's done through doing meetings where if you're having let's just say an hour-and-a-half meeting, one group comes for the first 45 minutes, another group comes for the other 45 minutes. So groups will have autonomy as to how they conduct those meetings so long as they are following the guidelines within capacity limits.
All right, thank you. Let's talk to Jennifer Tugas with this question. How will parking passes work for the fall and spring semesters? If we are online for the fall, will we be reimbursed for the fall semester and be able to keep it for the spring if we have classes in person? Or will it need to be returned in full for the refund and not be able to have the pass for the spring semester?
So in terms of parking, if you do want to return your permit for a full refund, you have through the first week of classes to do that. If you choose to keep your permit, then of course those charges would apply for this semester. If you do choose to turn your permit in, we will have permit sales for the spring semester. So you do have that option. It may not be in the same location, but we will definitely have permits available for sale in the spring. All of our parking, we maintain wait lists for different parking lots, and you can manage that through your online account as well.
All right. For this one, I'm going to go back to Laura, and you may be reiterating some information you've already shared, but this question says, How will testing and contact tracing be set up? Will students, faculty, and staff be able to be tested if they have no symptoms or if they have symptoms? If one is a contact of a person with COVID-19 and asymptomatic, can they be tested or only quarantined until showing symptoms?
I believe the way it's set up, and Chris, you can correct me if I'm wrong, anybody that wishes to be tested can go to Graves Gilbert Clinic and be tested. The difference is if you've been identified through contact tracing, it's not going to change your 14 days of quarantine necessarily. Just because if you find out you've been exposed or been in direct contact with a case, and you go the very next day and get tested and it's negative, you still have to do the 14 days of quarantine. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That's correct.
Do you want to add anything?
Sure,
Okay.
sure. When it comes to testing, we provide three major sources of testing. We provide testing for asymptomatic people through antibody testing. We screen for that, looking for people who test positive. If you're symptomatic, you jump to the front of the line and you're tested using the PCR, the live virus test. And if you have what we call peace of mind, if you've been exposed and you've encountered someone and you feel uncomfortable and you want to be tested just to make sure, we'll do that for you as well. So we cover the gamut as far as testing goes.
All right. Candace, I'm going to ask you to speak to this just because Preston Center obviously hires a lot of student workers. Someone wrote in and said, my daughters are asking if and when they can apply for on-campus jobs. Are you aware if that's any different this year because of the pandemic?
It is not. We've actually been doing quite a bit of hiring down in the Preston Center. And that can be found if you go to the Student Financial Aid website and search student employment. They will have a page with a list of how all of the requirements to become a student employee, as well as a link to Handshake, because any job on campus, they are required to apply through Handshake before they can be hired by that department. So hiring is occurring at this moment, this very moment.
All right. Andrew, will fraternities and sororities be monitored to ensure that no large groups of people gather on campus in small areas?
Fraternities and sororities will be monitored. That's something that we've done even before the pandemic at various times, especially nighttime and weekend. We monitor that, and something that we will continue to do this semester, just like any other.
And we will be talking more about recruitment later on as for the sororities and the fraternities. Let's go back to Chris Thorne on a question for Graves Gilbert Clinic that has just come in during our live session here. It says, it's wondering which insurances you all accept, specifically asking about TRICARE being accepted at Nashville Road, but not on campus.
That's a very good question. Thank you. For you folks who don't know who Graves Gilbert Clinic is, we're the largest independent physician group in the state. We've been providing healthcare services for the last 6 years here on campus and had a very, very rich, rewarding experience here. We accept all insurances. And so TRICARE is accepted at Graves Gilbert Clinic. You mentioned accepted at one place and not the other. In theory, they should be accepted in both places. And if you know of a situation where they're not, please let me know. But we do accept insurances from all carriers.
All right. Jennifer, I have one for you and then also a live one for you, but we'll start with this one. One of my biggest concerns for WKU reopening is the bus system. Buses and bus stops at WKU are frequently overcrowded, and social distancing may not be possible on them even if they are not overcrowded. How will WKU address this issue?
Thank you for that question. This is something that we've been working on all summer. And we're really in the unusual position of trying to design routes that reduce the number of passengers on the bus as opposed to put as many students as we can. So we do have new bus routes for the fall. And you can look at that information at our website, wku.edu/transportation. We will be enforcing social distancing on the buses. So we will be limiting the number of students that can ride at a time. We're also requiring masks on the buses. We do have some other precautions that we'll be taking. We'll be cleaning the buses frequently, including disinfecting the buses overnight. So there are several steps that we've taken on the transit side to try and ensure student safety as well as driver safety during this pandemic. It is important to go ahead and visit that website to familiarize yourself with those routes. Of importance is we are closing several of the bus stops, the busiest bus stops on campus. So we won't even be at those bus stops.
Okay, and then the other question that just came in, it says, if a student purchases a housing permit but chooses to commute, can that permit be exchanged? Does the student need to get a different permit?
So yes, that permit can be exchanged and the student should do that. If you email our office at transportation@wku.edu or call our office at 270-745-2361, we can assist you with that.
All right, thank you. Candace, this is pertaining to the Preston Center. Will it be open? And if so, what will be the guidelines?
The Preston Center will be open, given that everyone follows the guidelines that are in place. We are currently open. We have been open since July 13th and have been testing out our new protocols on those that are around for the summer. All of our guidelines can be found on our website, wku.edu/CRW. And there is a link for our COVID guidelines where you can find everything there. It's quite a bit to go through, so I'm not going to run down that extreme list. What we do know is that there's a capacity limit for the facility. So we do have where you are checking in and checking out of the facility now, which was not a thing prior to the pandemic. And then also, we have separated some things so that we have everything socially distanced. So we have 2 fitness areas now. We have a fitness center located on our blue courts as well as our original fitness center where everything is socially distanced. And masks are required within the facility if you are not actively working out. So if you are on a piece of equipment or running on the track, you do not need a mask, or swimming in the pool. Of course, we don't want anyone to drown with the mask on their face. But swimming in the pool, you can take your mask off, but as you're moving about the facility, you will need to keep a mask on your face.
All righty. Let's bring in Sharon Hunter for this live question. If a student living on campus tests positive at some point, where will students quarantine?
That's a great question. It's part of a whole system of care for the student. Once we identify the student, it depends on what they test. They're positive, asymptomatic, or symptomatic. We house those students in different areas. We left Barnes Campbell standing instead of tearing it down like we had planned to do this semester. And that will house a number of students. So it depends on the student situation. I think it was mentioned previously that we'll be delivering meals to those students 3 times a day. They will have staff that check on them. We ask them every day how they're doing. If they require assistance or would like to speak to counseling, if they have academic needs. So we try to make it as easy for the student, even though they're inconvenienced by the isolation or quarantine, to continue their studies as they are able to do.
All right, thank you. I want to bring in Zach Greenwell. We appreciate you being here from an athletic standpoint to talk a little bit about the student fan experience. I know football is one of our first seasons coming up. Just kind of tell us your perspective on all of this.
Thank you, Amy. Obviously, like most things, sports are still very much in flux, and we know that although we're planning on having sports here in the fall, that we may not necessarily, have those things look the way they have in the past. So we're still working through some of those things and working on guidance from the governor and from CDC and obviously our great medical partners here in town. I think fans can, if we are able to have fans and what capacity we will have, we certainly know that those people will obviously face some of the things that we've seen that are being produced by everybody in terms of social distancing and masks and potentially temperature checks and everything that we can do to keep people safe. In terms of the student experience, I think basically we know that students are obviously a huge part of what we do, and athletics are a big part of the college experience. So we want to be able to accommodate as many students as we can, as safely as we can. We hope to be able to share that soon. For those that have seen, obviously our football opener was moved back yesterday to more align with the people around the country in terms of what others are doing and when their seasons are starting. But we will be sharing that information soon, and people can look at wkusports.com and our social media channels for more information.
Thank you. Next question, either Chris or Laura can chime in on this. The question is, why would a positive antibody test require quarantine? Exposure could have happened months ago with the student no longer being contagious.
Sure. I'd be happy to take that question. Let's break that down into a couple of pieces. One, there's no assurance that antibodies will provide immunity to the disease. While it hasn't been documented that I'm aware of, no one has contacted the disease once and then recontacted it again. But in an effort to be conservative in this type of environment, we think anybody who tests positive on an antibody or PCR should be quarantined. And that's just an abundance of care concern for the students.
Okay. Laura, we'll take this one for you. Will vending machine with mask be available in each building prior to master plan?
Yes, we are working that out now where we will be able to provide disposable masks and possibly cloth masks to all individuals. And also the bookstore will be selling that as well. And I believe Jennifer wants to chime in on that also.
Yeah, I'll add to that our vending machines will carry disposable masks for sale. They will also have a disinfecting kit that includes the mask, hand sanitizing bottle, and a sanitizing wipe. And then, yes, as you mentioned, the bookstore will be carrying face masks as well, probably more of the cloth branded variety. And you can visit wkustore.com to see what the bookstore has to offer.
All right, thank you. Now we have a couple of different questions coming in about missing class. We'll bring in Rob Hale for this question. If a student misses class because of a mandated quarantine, will the absences be excused?
Yeah, the short answer, Amy, is yes. Students will need to communicate with their professors and try to stay as much as they're able, on top of things as much as they're able. But those absences will definitely be excused.
Okay, and this has been coming in a lot too, also for you, Rob. Will there be spaces for small groups to study together, especially for students taking online courses?
Probably not, unless there's enough space to socially distance and follow all the protocols. We're not going to have lounge areas like we have in the past because we're trying to be very conservative and cautious about this. Now, we will have some Zoom rooms available for students to use in between classes, for students that maybe go to a hybrid class and then have a fully online class that they need to do shortly after. And there'll be plenty of space in those rooms and cleaning kits in there to make sure students are safe.
All right. Andrew, let's talk a little bit about sorority recruitment. A mom, I think it's a mother wrote in and said, I'm confused that my daughter's sorority, I'm confused about how it will even function given that so many courses are online or hybrid. So do you want to talk about how sorority has made a decision to go virtual this year and how they are going to be able to press on just in a new way, basically?
So last week, our sororities voted, and they voted to move sorority recruitment to a virtual format. Most all of the factors of recruitment still remain the same. Move-in remains the same. All those ladies going through recruitment will have a recruitment counselor who will guide them through the process. In terms of it being a mutual selection process, all of that remains the same. The only difference with sorority recruitment in terms of recruitment itself is it will be done virtually via Zoom instead of in person. Most every factor outside of that is similar to the in-person factor. One of the things I do encourage ladies going through recruitment is to ask chapters as to what sort of things they are doing and planning to keep that personal experience. Because one of the big reasons why people do join Greek is for that interpersonal experience. So that will depend on that individual chapter and that chapter's national organization as to various factors of what they can and can't do in terms of using the house or various other factors. But that's something to talk about during recruitment as to what those plans are and what those chapters are doing to ensure a great new member experience and what things they are doing in person.
Well, and let's just move on to the fraternity, because that begins the first day of classes. And at this point, that's still in person, correct?
Yes, so last week our sororities voted to switch recruitment to a virtual format. Our fraternities have voted to still keep with it in-person format. So that happens the first week of classes, August 24th through 28th. And that we're taking various measures just to make sure that that is a safe process in terms of making sure that groups are no more than 10 people. Everybody going through fraternity recruitment will be in what's called a Rho Alpha group. That's a recruitment counselor, and that will be a maximum of 10 people per group. And what we're doing with the fraternities is what we are calling a pod style. So we are going to each of the houses and identifying separate spaces where the fraternities members can recruit the new members, where they are distanced with each other and in separate spaces. So it's a pod style recruitment. Again, everybody will be wearing masks. Everybody will be socially distancing. We've already talked about, how in the past, sometimes fraternities have had, various food options for people to have. That's something we're not going to do just because, having a buffet style food thing, that really wouldn't be a safe and sanitary thing to do that. But we are still looking at an in-person process with fraternity recruitment at this moment. Yes.
All right, thank you. Let's hit on quarantine some more with both Laura and Sharon. Will students have the opportunity to quarantine at home instead of in the on-campus quarantine option? There are some concerns about students being lonely if they isolate on campus. So Laura, if you'll talk about options, and then Sharon will talk about how we can engage these students that are in quarantine on campus.
Certainly, Amy. The short answer to this is yes, absolutely. The students that live on campus in on-campus housing, if they are identified as positive, either symptomatic or asymptomatic, will have the option to return home in that instance for their 14-day quarantine. The way the procedure is set up right now is once that student is identified, Sharon will reach out to you via phone call and discuss your options with you. So I'll let Sharon take it from here.
Okay, I'm happy to. As the mother of 4 adult children, this was an important question for me. The other part of my title that they didn't put on here, that's the important part for tonight, is parent and family programs. I coordinate those for WKU. And after 27 years, the reason I'm coordinating the services for the students is identifying those resources that they can use, the counseling center that I mentioned before, the personal outreach, and connecting them to resources. The Dean of Students, wonderful set of resources, and that is in their wheelhouse. So we'll make sure that the students who may have forgotten the resources they have available to them, we will remind them. And there's a daily survey, as I mentioned, I think before, where we ask, what do you need? Are there any things that you're missing? Academic issues, just that we're there because the families can't be right at that point for whatever reason. So we will be looking out for that.
Well, Sharon, while we've got the camera on you, there's another question that just came in about master plan. Is there a day during master plan that will be a family day? And can parents help students move in if they are doing master plan?
I'll do the second part first because that's the easier one. Absolutely. When you get your move-in slots, there are dedicated periods of time for you to help move your student in. And the student can bring as many helpers with them as they'd like to. On the family day for master plan, I'm thinking it's going to be virtual. We have a more compressed cycle, and as we talked about yesterday, 24 days of move-in. So getting all of the parents into 24 different sessions is beyond even my superpowers. So we're going to do a virtual thing, and stay tuned to the Parent Family Portal for more information coming out in your newsletter.
Excellent. You all are sending in some wonderful questions. We want to remind you to submit those at forum.questions@wku.edu. We are monitoring them and getting to as many as we possibly can. Now let's move to Dr. Holland. Dr. Holland, can you talk a bit about student conduct expectations as it relates to mask and social distancing requirements?
Thank you, Amy. Well, of course, I can talk about the high expectations that we have for students, and we do have high expectations for students. Any student who applies to WKU on their admissions application, they sign that form that says, I agree to comply with guidelines, policies, procedures at WKU. So knowing that students have already read that document and have already agreed to comply with the institution expectations relative to mask wearing, social distancing, practicing good hygiene, and all the other things that we expect out of them, we know that they are going to comply. We may have a few outliers, as we sometimes do, but they are few outliers. The student conduct process out of my office and also the Office of Student Conduct, we're prepared to assist students who choose not to adhere to the expectations that we have set up for them. Our goal is to mitigate the risk of transmission, mitigate that risk. And our policies and procedures will speak to that and speak to that very well.
All right, thank you. Jennifer, you touched on this. Just reiterate the cleaning, how the cleaning will be addressed on buses. And you talked about the buses will be running and they will be cleaned.
So thank you for that. More information about the sanitation practices we'll have on the buses. We do have a fogging machine that will disinfect the buses each night, and we'll do that for all of the buses that we put in circulation. The drivers will also periodically wipe down the common touch surfaces on the buses throughout the day. So once they've made a round, or maybe every couple of rounds, they'll go through the bus and wipe down the different hold areas, some of the seats and so forth. So we've really elevated the cleaning practices on the bus. That's something that we started even back in January when the virus first started to appear in China. As we were starting to monitor the spread of the virus back in January and February, we started those practices, and we'll continue those in the fall.
All right, thank you. Laura, this question just came in. If a student tests positive and has to quarantine, will the roommate also have to quarantine? Will they do so together in the same room?
If a student tests positive and has to quarantine, the roommate will be considered a close contact. And there's two different categories of a positive case. You have your positive symptomatic and your positive asymptomatic. So it really depends on if those two individuals, if they're both symptomatic or if they're both asymptomatic, whether or not they'll be able to share a room. We have provisions for either case, so it'll really depend on the individual case whether or not you'll get to continue to share a room or not.
All right, thank you. Sharon, this question is, what is Parents Weekend going to look like?
As far as my crystal ball is showing right now, everything is subject to change. We're continuing to plan for Parent and Family Weekend. It's the highlight of my year, and we expanded to 3 days last year, so stay tuned. We're planning for that weekend to go ahead, but as you've learned the past 4 months, anything can change. Read your Parent and Family newsletter.
We can't flag that enough. Rob, here's a question for you. This is regarding contingencies for when classes go online. What if a student has technical issues during an exam or when assignments are due? Will professors/instructors be proctoring online during the exam? This actually happened to my daughter this spring. It was very stressful. Thank you and go Tops. That was the
All
question.
right. It's a good question, and like a lot of the questions, the answer is it depends. Some instructors won't be doing traditional tests. They'll be doing different types of assessments of student learning. So it may be that they don't need to proctor the exams. Some, if they're in a hybrid situation, for example, most instructors who are going to give traditional tests will do those during one of the face-to-face days during that session. But if a faculty member does have a student doing an online exam and there are technical issues, they should reach out to the instructor. I remember hearing about a case during the remote times last semester, and we were able to give the students another chance to take the test, and it worked out. And that's kind of the main thing I want to emphasize is if you're ever having any kind of problems, like a technical issue, communicate with your instructor. They want you to be successful, and they need to hear from you if you have a problem. If you can't get in touch with them, certainly contact the department head in that department, and they can put the two of you in contact to resolve whatever kind of issues you might be having.
Okay, well, sticking with you for this next one, it says, what if my teacher is saying that we are to come back for in-person class, but I am not comfortable doing so? What should I do?
I mean, the modalities, the classroom types are set right now. I mean, they're either going to be online, hybrid, or face-to-face. So you won't really be shifting from online to face-to-face. If you're in an online class now, as we make our way through this semester anyway, it's going to stay online.
Okay, thank you. Laura, what is the protocol if a student begins to feel sick?
Absolutely. Thank you, Amy. The real message that we want to present and share with everyone, and this is not just students, this is faculty, staff, visitors, everybody. If you do not feel well, do not come to campus. If we do have a COVID hotline that you can call and seek advice about what symptoms you're feeling and what steps you might need to take next, and we would be glad to answer those questions. But really, the message is if you don't feel well, don't come to campus.
We want to reiterate the COVID hotline. I don't know if we've said it, so we can't reiterate it yet, but it is 270-745-2019, and that you can call 24 hours a day. We will try to remind you of that number. Andrew, talk about this some more. Will there still be clubs for freshmen to join? How will that work with social distancing?
Absolutely. So WKU is home to 300 plus different student organizations of all different types, whether that be faith-based, departmental, fraternity, sorority, intramural leadership, all those types of things. Within the first few weeks of school, we have what is called Discover Fest, and that is an opportunity for all of those clubs and organizations to kind of highlight what they do and their purpose and get members. That will be done via a virtual format this year. It would not be practical to have 300 different clubs and organizations meet in one specified location. One of the nice things about that is that's something we're going to put on our website on student activity so people can view that at any time, and it will be sectioned off based off of the type of organization. So for instance, there will be a Discover Fest for faith-based groups. There will be ones for leadership organizations, things like that. And that's something those clubs can talk about as to what plans they have to meet in person or what modalities they will use. That is up to the organization. And again, they have the autonomy to do that however they please, just so long as they are following whatever those guidelines are in terms of capacity limits and social distancing.
All right, thank you. Sharon, talk about where students or how will students get their student IDs?
That's a good question. Our first year students went through a new process this past year where they uploaded their IDs, and instead of getting them at an in-person orientation session, those were mailed out to them. Any student who signed up for Top Drop and Go, 1,300 of you, should have been mailed and received their ID because they will need that for access to the building. For students who are participating in Move-In for Master Plan, Those IDs will be sealed safely in your packet that you will pick up at your curbside pickup. Videos for all of those on wku.edu/health. Is the best resource for any family or anyone else who's wondering about how we're doing things on the Hill. The FAQs are amazing, so I highly recommend it.
Yes, thank you. Rob, you talked about some space becoming available for students needing to do Zoom calls. This question has just come in. I have an in-person class right before an online Zoom class, and I live off campus. Where can I go on campus to take the class?
That's a great question, and we're working on that right now. We're putting together a guide that will tell you which room in which academic building will have Zoom capacity. We'll post the capacity on that room. We'll have cleaning supplies in there, and students will be able to go in there and Zoom. They'll need to bring headphones because there'll probably be a few other students in there. So if they want to participate, they're going to definitely need to have headphones for that. But that guide will show up on the Healthy on the Hill website that Sharon was just talking about.
Okay. Chris, just to follow up on the TRICARE being accepted, someone had asked about that and also said, how will the billing process work?
Sure. As far as TRICARE goes, we accept all major insurances. What would be a really good hint for you, for your loved ones, is take a picture of the front and back of your insurance card at home. And that way your student will have it at all times, and that will facilitate the billing. With that insurance card, we can bill your insurances, and we'll bill your insurances directly for you. A couple other things. There's also Hipaa Paperwork. I recommend that you fill out the Hipaa Paperwork. There's nothing more frustrating. I've been lucky enough to have 2 children go through the Western program here. Very, very happy with it. But when you call and you're the parent and you say, I pay the bills, how's my child doing? And they're saying, your child's 18 years old, we can't tell you. So it's very important to fill out the Hipaa paperwork and have your child be able to release that information to you, the parent.
Is that available at the GGC at WKU offices?
That is definitely available on campus. Okay. Other thing, there was something about a child feeling ill maybe in their room or something, not knowing what to do. We offer telemedicine. We offer telemedicine 7 to 7, 7 days a week. And you can call that number and be contacted with a nurse practitioner or a physician. Okay. There's also a wonderful facility on campus. Western is providing a beautiful facility for patient care, and they feel free to come there. Okay.
And then as a follow-up to that though, what about an emergency after those hours?
Sure. After our emergencies, the first thing you should do, we have a physician on call number. If it's an emergency at any time, call 911. Okay, pure and simple. There's a very nice ambulance service. The police here will help with transport as well. Get the child to an emergency room if that's needed. If it's urgent, then you can call the physician number on call, and they can direct you to either talk to a doctor. They might talk to you right then, or they might.
Back to an academic question. Will we be able to meet with our professors one-on-one to discuss classwork? Because email can cause miscommunication.
Good question. The best way to interact with your professors is going to be through a Zoom session. A lot of faculty are setting up Zoom office hours, so it'll be easy to kind of show up and dial in and have that kind of interaction. In some rare cases, you might be able to meet with your faculty member outside of class, but most of the
It needs to get to. So those are just some of the services. In addition to that, on the Healthy on the Hill, we have or will have a video, a very short video that we're using to talk about coping, to talk about what students can do as we figure out how to live with this pandemic. Sharon, I'm sure there's some things that I've missed, so.
Well, I will say here, we did cut out for a bit our video. We've had some technical issues. So Sharon, if we can reiterate that email address before you give your take on this.
Oh, the Dean of Students at wku.edu. See, I can give credit where credit is due.
Thank you.
The other part of the services that I would highlight would be those that are in housing and residence life. We also have a care team for our students, and we live with your young adult 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We are an eye there with them. We see them going out and coming in, and even with the masks, we can tell if their eyes are shining or if we need to follow up. So that's another set of eyes and care that are available. And I hope you're hearing the one thing that always surprises me every time I'm in a group like this, and that is there is a web of services, a web of people who are extending their arms and wrapping them around the students. It's something that we do better than anybody else, and yes, I'm prejudiced, but it's those services. It's the Dean of Students office. I can pick up the phone and call them. A student that's isolating or not involved, I can call Drew and say, you know, the student's got an interest in X. How do we engage them? How do we keep them involved? So that's how we do it, and that's how we take care and support our students.
Absolutely, absolutely. Jennifer, I have one or two here for you really quick. One, where will we park on move-in day?
So we have set up loading zones around the residence halls for move-in. Those will be in effect starting now, since we're doing the top drop and roll. But officially starting Monday, we'll have a number of different loading zones that are near the residence halls. Anybody who usually parks in those areas, we're actually asking them to move to the perimeter lots so that we can have those loading zones next to the residence halls. No permit is required. So, you know, if you're bringing your small caravan to help move in for your appointment, then you're free to do that. But we do ask that once you've had your time for the loading and unloading, that you do move to those perimeter lots. We're also partnering with the housing department so that when we have the busy move-in days right before master plan, and we have the check-in locations at parking structure 2 and parking structure 3, we are partnering with them to help with that process. So certainly if you have any questions, please feel free to call our office or email our office at transportation@wku.edu.
And I'm not sure what for you to say about this, but the student wrote in and said, what if there's no parking available when I come back to campus from visiting my family? Who do I contact? Specifically referencing the H4 Poland parking lot.
So all of the permit zones for students, we do limit permit sales to those areas. So when you come back for the weekend, you should have parking available within those spots. If for some reason more illegal people are parking and taking up their space, then park somewhere else and send us an email and we'll certainly take care of that. But all of that should be handled through the Parking and Transportation Services office. But again, we do limit permit sales to each location, and you should have parking available within your zone.
Thank you. The Hipaa paperwork is a popular topic apparently. Chris, can you remind viewers where to get that paperwork and the purpose of the Hipaa release form?
Sure. In the prior years, you do it during move-in. You can come to health services and sign up at that point in time, pick up a document. Master plan has always been a great time to do it. I'm not sure how it's going to go this year as far as virtual, but the best way is to contact the local office right there on campus, and we can get you HIPAA form real easy. We'll take it scanned, emailed, whichever way it's most convenient for you.
That topic kind of segues into this question that was emailed. It says, if my child were to get COVID, what are the procedures? How would we be notified? Would we have information and ability to handle our child's care? And we've already talked about where they would be quarantined. Laura, do you want to hit that again?
Again, I think this is really pushing back on the HIPAA situation, because technically your student at age 18 is an adult, and so we are kind of bound by the HIPAA law. And so without your student sharing that personally with you, we are unable to do that unless you do have the HIPAA paperwork filled out. So that's very important for this, especially for today's climate and what the things that we're dealing with. And I understand people have a lot of anxiety about that. So I encourage you to do that if you feel that you would like to have that form already in place before the semester starts.
Okay, thank you very much. Lynn, I think this will go to you. If not, someone else jump in. Will students have access to areas here in the Downing, or not here, but across the street in the Downing Student Union, such as ping pong tables, pool tables? If so, will they need to supply their own equipment, such as paddles, etc.?
I'm going to defer to Andrew for that.
That's a good question, and I do not have the answer at this moment, but we'll get the answer and can distribute that out, whatever means.
You know, we can add answers to the frequently asked questions, so we will try to do that to some of these that we either haven't gotten to or weren't sure about. Jennifer, this kind of relates to the store, the WKU store. How do students find out the textbooks that are required, and how do you order?
Thank you for that question regarding WKU store. We encourage you to go online to buy those books. You can go to wkustore.com, and there's a tab directly for textbooks. Also tabs for apparel or gear, anything else that you want, a little big red, all the things that you want to get you ready for school. We do encourage you to choose to either have your books ready for pickup or to have them shipped to you. Barnes & Noble is now our bookstore operator, and they are offering free shipping for those books. So take advantage of that opportunity and go ahead, order your books early, have them shipped to you, and then you'll be ready for the first day of classes.
All right, Candace, does the school plan to have intramural sports this fall?
Good question. Currently, yes. We are still examining what that's going to look like due to the Healthy at Work guidelines for athletics. There will be options similar to how we did last year with the early, when we transitioned to online, we did some esports. So if guidelines do not loosen up a little bit, we will look at offering esports for our competitive sports offerings for the fall semester, but we are currently planning for in-person intramural sports at this time.
All right, thank you. Zach, what will WKU do about fans in the stands for WKU athletic competitions?
Again, certainly we're trying to make a lot of contingency plans for what sports will look like this fall, and no sport will be the same. Obviously, outdoor sports are an entirely different consideration than indoor sports. So in this case of football, I think that's what's on everybody's mind in particular right now. Like I said earlier, we're working with the governor and CDC and our medical partners to figure out what will be possible. That's being figured out around the country in terms of what part of capacity will be required, how much distance will be needed in those spaces. So we're making plans for just about every different percentage of capacity we could have, hoping that we can accommodate as many students and season ticket holders and other fans as we want to safely. And then, we'll obviously work our way backward based on what they deem fit, what they think is appropriate based on where we're at that time.
All right, thank you. Sharon, you've been described as our concierge for the students that may have to be in quarantine. The question is, if a student does need to quarantine, should they have a go bag prepared, or will they be able to return to their dorm to get supplies that they need?
Great question. And I'm going to say no. Here's why. When a student has to move to isolation or quarantine, we want them to take the minimum items that they would have. We have developed a packing list that will keep the student comfortable, give them their academic needs, textbooks, laptop, tablets, that sort of thing. But we don't want them moving a great deal of things from one space to the other.
All right. I'm not sure if Chris or Laura wants to take this, but I've seen this question more than once. It says, Is there a plan in place to have students take a COVID-19 test the week before returning to campus? Some doctors are requiring a negative test just to see a patient. Why isn't WKU requiring a negative test before students return to campus classes and dorms? Laura, I think David addressed this, so if you want to.
Yes, he did. He addressed this on the previous forum, and I'll reiterate what we're doing is following the current guidelines from the local public health officials and Graves Gilbert Clinic to some degree, and stating that a PCR test is merely a photograph of that moment, and so it really doesn't reflect, if you take a test 2 weeks before you come to campus, it really doesn't reflect what your health status might be on that day. And so I think I've covered that enough. I don't, Chris, do you want to expound on that?
No, that's a difficult question. Because the test is taken as a snapshot of that time frame, and you may or may not be ill at that time. You may or may not be infected at that time, but you haven't received a large enough virus dose yet to start shedding and showing positive. So your test might say you're negative, but you're really a walking symptomatic or asymptomatic super spreader at that point in time if you're not careful. So what we do is we have, if you want to get tested when you come to campus, we're not going to deny anybody tests. We want everybody to be comfortable with their positions and the family. But having tests 10 days in advance or 5 days in advance really won't really help the program.
All right, thank you. And Rob, will students have a choice to take a test online or on paper?
That's another good question, and the answer is, once again, it depends. Professors will be the ones that sort of set those standards. I imagine that they would make an arrangement if someone really felt strongly that they needed to take it online. But the discipline a lot of times is going to dictate whether it needs to be on paper or online. So if you're worried about that, I would encourage you to contact your instructor early at the beginning of the semester and see if you can work something out that you feel comfortable with.
All right, and Andrew, let's go back over to you. We have talked about fraternity recruitment still being in person as of right now. We are getting questions about changes to parties. Do you want to add anything about that?
With fraternity recruitment, it's still an in-person model, and actually that week still stays the same. So what fraternity looks like is the first 2 days we are taking all participants around to all the houses, and that's over the course of 2 days, so we can have small group sizes and so they can see all of the houses. On the third day, we call it top 5 night, and we just recommend that those people limit themselves to only going to 5 groups. Some people go to 5, some people know where they want to go and they go to 1, and that is their choice. Thursday is the last night of active recruitment, and that is preference night. And the way that works in WKU system is probably one of the most sorority-like recruitments for fraternity recruitment I know, is those people going through recruitment state their top 3 choices, and each of the fraternities have an invite list, and they will invite that back. And that's kind of like sorority recruitment. And again, if the person going through recruitment lists Group A, Group B, and Group C, and those 3 groups invite them back, they'll get a schedule of Group A, Group B, and Group C. And there will be different invite times where that person will go to those houses on that Thursday night. Friday is bid day. One thing we have worked, and one thing that's just different this year, is minimizing groups coming down to the Downing Student Union. We are assigning times for each group to bring those people who are signing with that particular chapter down to DSU. And people who go through recruitment can receive bids. Some receive 1, some can receive multiple. And fraternity recruitment style, it works that way where you can receive as many bids as the fraternities will give out, and those people will sign. And that's what that looks like in terms of a party schedule throughout fraternity recruitment.
All right, well, we're going to leave it there. We want to thank you all again so much for tuning in. It's been some excellent information. Thanks also to these panelists for providing as many answers as they possibly could. If you still have questions that we did not get to, you can email those to covid19@wku.edu. We want to remind you a recording of today's forum as well as Monday's forum will remain on WKU's Facebook page as well as on our website that we've referenced a few times this past hour. It's wku.edu/healthyonthehill. This is WKU's online repository for all things reopening. Please stay well and go Tops.